All right.
Definitely recording now.
It's official. It's official. Yes. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you. This is actually a really nice turnout for a rainy weekend on the mountain. You probably don't see, but we do have Taddy online as well, who's joining us.
Wave to Taddy. And Rick.
I think you're on mute, Taddy. I don't think we can hear you. Sorry. So I'd like to officially open the Wild Mountains Annual General Meeting for the 2023 financial year at 12:42 p.m. on Sunday, the 21st of April, 2024. I'll start with some apologies. Luke Reid. Therese Zadkovich. Ashley McCarty and Joan McVilly. Does anyone else have any other apologies? There is more?
No.
Oh, and sorry, and Victoria Hills, Vic. Thank you. Or Norden. Victoria Norden. Can I also start by acknowledging that I don't have a copy of last year's AGM minutes. Does anyone have a copy of last year's AGM minutes to record?
No, I didn't print them out. I've got them electronically. Yeah.
Would anyone like to, who has reviewed the AGM minutes from last year, pass that they are a true and accurate reflection of the AGM? Thank you, Emma. And would anyone like to second that? You're brave. Thank you, Liz. All right, now let's get into formalities. And before we proceed, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where Wild Mountains is located today. The Miginberri tribe of the Yugambeh language group, who have lived here for many thousands of years in this area. As the present custodians of the land, we acknowledge their culture, their knowledges and their stories, and we pay respect to their elders, past and present and emerging. I'd also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. At Wild Mountains, we always endeavour to the best of our abilities to nurture this land for future generation. We'll start today with my President's report, as we normally do, and then hand over to Rick Gillow from Gillow & Teese, our company auditors, will provide his audit report, and then run through the renomination of office bearers. So, kicking off, I'm really excited to share that 2023 for Wild Mountains was I guess a better year than we expected. So you might remember that we had a bumper year in 2022, and during the annual general meeting last year, I did acknowledge that we were unlikely to see a replica of those kind of figures. And in some ways, from a numbers point of view, that has actually been the case, but in other ways, there have been some significant achievements that I'd really like to share and acknowledge with everyone today. So you might recall that the Wild Mountains Strategic Plan was launched last year, the Strategic Plan for 2022 through to 2026. And we had a number of initiatives for our first year under the Strategic Plan, and they were our strategic focus areas of financial stability, education, marketing, infrastructure, land care, and staff and volunteers. And I'm really pleased to report that we've had some good progress in most of those areas. So let's start with what I think are the three key highlights for 2023. So on the 18th of March in 1998, the Wild Mountains Trust and Wild Mountains Limited Company, who acts as the trustee for the trust, were created, along with our Articles of Association, or essentially what governs the way we operate. In March last year, we celebrated 25 years, or the 25-year anniversary of the trust. And later in October, we hosted a wonderful event reflecting reflecting on and celebrating the 25-year journey and the future ahead. And it was all set in Rob Peagram's beautiful barn at the Crossing with amazing food, great music, and most importantly, great company. The second highlight for 2023 was one, I think, of quite significance in terms of a milestone for Wild Mountains, and that was the appointment of our first centre manager, Meg. The importance of this role is critical in supporting the board to lead Wild Mountains operations and our strategic goals. And Meg's been a good friend and volunteer of Wild Mountains for almost a decade. So she's helped on Earth Keepers, Land Care, ISV, volunteer weekends, and also supported Wild Mountains as a live-in resident in Whiptail throughout a big chunk of 2023 as well. And you might have read when we did announce Meg's appointment from her bio that she does bring a diversity of experience in outdoor and environmental education. And we're just generally thrilled to have Meg and her son Diego, who's running around somewhere, on board.
Thank you.
The third highlight for 2023, and I'd say undoubtedly the most broadly publicised, was the Trek to Reconnect. So Liz and her support crew, Jay and Rowan, spent 7 months and travelled 60,000 kilometres. Sorry, 6,000. Sounds 60,000. We must have that as a typo somewhere else in the report. Sorry. Clearly, I'm not good with geography. Mainly by foot and a bit on bike, from Rathdowney to the west coast of Australia to engage with dozens of schools and community groups to explore and discuss environmental concerns. And they've returned with some amazing insights that will undoubtedly help to shape our future activities. And we'll get Liz to talk a little bit about that in the general meeting. So shifting sort of into a bit of the detail, from a financial perspective, program income, facilities use, and our facilities use income fell during 2023, and we expected that it would. Rick will probably talk a bit more about that in his report. And one of the things that's important for us to kind of really understand is the inability to secure schools for our Earth Keepers program, for a whole range of reasons, continues to be a challenge for Wild Mountains. And while we have a number of initiatives in play, I guess last year we did see a slight offset in that shortfall through a range of additional programs that did bring in some revenue for Wild Mountains, which was good to see. And they were things like focusing on earth education. We ran a 4-day professional development and training workshop for teachers and leaders across Australia on environmental education pedagogy. And we also developed a kind of a bespoke program for a Hong Kong-based organisation called Voltra, who spent about 10 days, was it, with us over the Christmas period. And while developing some of these bespoke programs and massaging existing programs takes resources and it can be time consuming, the intent is really to create and foster long-lasting relationships that will diversify revenue streams for Wild Mountains over time. An important piece of work in this space that is underway and in part of our strategic plan is the assessment of opportunities to expand on mountain and off-mountain programs and to determine what environmental education learning will look like and what those needs will be of the future. So that's a piece of work that Meg will be leading for us and has already commenced in that space. Donation income has remained steady at around the $30,000 mark, which sort of continues along. And always we thank all of our financial supporters and contributors for your ongoing commitment and essentially know that the organisation wouldn't exist without you. So thank you. Grant income for 2023 was exceptionally high, and we haven't recorded this directly in the P&L from a financial point of view, but essentially the broader number has kind of exceeded $100,000, and that's driven by a lot of work that Richard and the team have done in terms of identifying and applying for grants that we can really further some of the work that we do, especially in the land care space. A big part of this is a $200,000 grant from the Department of Environment and Science, which is Science and Innovation now, and it's a koala grant for open forest rehabilitation to help remove invasive weeds in koala habitats, and that's over a 2-year period. So while most of that will be expensed to contractors, it's still an important contribution to our overall land care work that we have been focusing on, particularly in the next gen regen space, and I'll come back to that a little bit. Outside of these kind of activities, the board remains committed to improving our financial stability through key projects like becoming donor ready, to enable the organisation to pursue more corporate and philanthropic interests and deliver more fundraising events. One of the other things I think we've talked about quite a lot is a bequest program that Liz had started doing some work on some years ago that we're really keen to kind of get back on the radar. And naturally, as always, we would welcome any interest from our community to participate in those initiatives. And we will go into a little bit more detail about that in the general meeting. From an infrastructure perspective, important work has commenced on a review of our existing facilities to identify current and future maintenance and improvement works that are required, along with the identification of additional facilities and infrastructure required to support future growth. So this review will provide us with an opportunity to determine our priorities and narrow up our focus on important works that we have to do now, with the vision of the broader capital works down the track. And one example of that was we completed the royal we, the relining of the walls at Caddy's Place, which has been quite an important project, and that's now been completed. And for those who are physically here who haven't popped in, make sure you pop in because it's looking quite beautiful, along with the lovely new fireplace. So coming back to land care for a moment, land care does remain an important part of the work we do at Wild Mountains. And throughout 2023, there was significant rainforest rehabilitation completed around the mountain hut to reduce lantana growth. And as most of you would know, lantana management is an ongoing, relentless, multi-year program. And the next gen regen weekends have been integral in the follow-up work for monitoring and maintenance in that space. We expect that there will be a 3-year period for new trees to become established before we can start to move on to different areas. But it's an important piece of work in terms of that larger lantana management strategy. And the goal is to essentially rehabilitate approximately 50 hectares of land, which is quite an ambitious piece of work. Strategically, the on-the-ground activity is also being supported by the development of a broader plan for future stewardship of the Wild Mountains property. So all of this important work, as you can imagine, requires focus and coordination, and it couldn't happen without the support of our community. It also requires leadership. So as you know, Wild Mountains has been on a transitional journey from a founder-led model to a more commercially focused board. While not losing the sight of our vision, mission, and values, the economic and environmental challenges that have been observed over the recent years in particular has validated the need for our organisation to continue to evolve and adapt. And part of that evolution is the introduction of a new board structure that aligns the focus areas of Wild Mountains to specific board roles, similar to an executive board structure in an organisation. The structure will facilitate some increased focus and dedicated attention to our key priorities. And we will go through that maybe in a little bit more detail in the general meeting if we have some time. Otherwise, it will be more broadly published. The appointment of the Live-In Centre Manager has also been an important and critical part of that shift, and it will be an enabler to achieve our vision and mission. So I'd like to acknowledge the amazing work and commitment of the board, Emma Scragg, Liz Cameron, Victoria Norden, who can't be here today, and of course, Richard Zoomers. These amazing people continue to commit their valuable time, their skills, and their expertise free of charge to discuss, often debate, and agree on the direction that Wild Mountain needs to continue to make a difference in the lives of so many. I'm personally honoured to be surrounded by such passionate and intelligent people, and I really look forward to continuing the great work that we've done together. I'm delighted to report that Richard, Emma, Liz, Vic, and myself will all be standing for re-election into our existing roles, which will provide continued stability and direction for Wild Mountains. So together with Meg and our wonderful volunteers, I believe that Wild Mountains can continue to do amazing things. I'd like to also acknowledge Richard and Susan, our founders, and the residents who continue to commit their time and resources to further this amazing organisation. They're often quoted in testimonials as our glowing testimonials and reviews, as the warm, friendly faces who really make Wild Mountains what it is, and they've created the warmth and inclusiveness that most of us feel when we come up here. On behalf of the board and the wider community, and from deep in my heart, thank you. To all of our wonderful volunteers, our financial supporters, and every member of our community who contributes to advancing this cause, I'd like to also thank you. The organisation would not be here, we wouldn't be here now, and we wouldn't be here where it is today without each and every one of you, and we're truly grateful that you choose to be a part of Wild Mountains. I believe that I also mentioned this in my previous report last year, but the large group of people who make a positive impact to Wild Mountains are the hundreds of visitors that we have each year. And every child, every teacher, every volunteer, every person who comes for an event or participant on some sort of activity helps to broaden the network and our reach. And each and every one of those people who has experienced Wild Mountains firsthand has taken something away with them. And I genuinely believe that that will generate some sort of emotional and behavioural or financial dividend well into the future. And so that's the type of work that I think makes Wild Mountains what it is. As an environmental education organisation, our vision, mission and values are naturally aligned to improving the state of this precious planet and tackling the ever-evolving climate crisis. Our strategic plan also has ambitious goals, and they're designed to support that focus. So in closing, I'd just like to say, whether it's through active participation, donating your skills or time, or creating connections with others or financial contributions, please remain involved and continue to get involved in any way you can, because this planet needs you. Thank you. So I'll hand over now to Rick Gillow from Gillow & Teese, our auditors, to talk about amazing stats and numbers.
I probably should have brought a projector and we could have seen, everyone could see the figures, but...
pie chart. We need a pie chart.
Pie chart. I could scribble something up on the white.
Go on, make it.
All right. So just in continuation of what Richard said, basically, we've got the 2023 financial statements for Wild Mountains for the year. Starting with the income side of things, obviously donations were very similar, as Richard raised. The grant income, from an accounting point of view, we only record the income that we've used during the period. So Richard was talking about the koala grant. We received $86,000 of that. 74,000 of that we haven't actually spent. So at the moment, that's not recorded as income. It's recorded as as a payment in advance. So it will show on next year's financial statements when we spend the money, so that the two sort of show up in the same set of financial statements. So the grant income, in other words, the grant money that we received, that we spent money for this financial year, was $44,000. The project program/event income is $34,000, as opposed to 68 last year. So as Richard indicated, we knew the project, program and event income and the facility use were going to be down, and they were. They've been subsidised partially from a cash flow point of view by the increase in grant income, also from the income from the Trek to Reconnect. So basically, we've ended up with $140,000 worth of income, whereas last year we had about $152,000 worth of income. So it sustained itself, even though we were expecting it to be lower. From an expenses point of view, our expenses are up. I hate the fact that my accounting fees appear as the first expense. Like you can't see that, but that's all right. So they're actually a little bit down compared to the year before. The bookkeeper costs are in there as well, which are about the same as mine. The program and event income is actually down from $23,000 down to $14,000, but that makes sense because obviously we don't have as much program income. There's a reasonable amount of depreciation during the year. That's obviously of all the new equipment that we've bought over the last 2 or 3 years, including the camper that was used for Trek to Reconnect. Our grant expenses were $20,000 for the year. If you remember, I said there was about 44 grants worth of grant income. We've got 20 grants worth of grant expenses here, but then there's about 20 grand worth of grant expenses that we've capitalised, which is showing in the depreciation. So from a cash flow point of view, we brought in 44 grand worth of grant income. We paid 20 grand worth of grant expenses, and we bought 20 grand worth of grant assets, which is showing in the depreciation, which we'll get a tax deduction for over the next 1 or 2 years as we depreciate those assets. The insurance went through the roof. The directors were aware of that, and I've got a whole bunch of people nodding, so most people are aware that insurance went through the roof after COVID. So that was 22 grand this year compared to 16,000 last year. We pay interest on the funding of the insurance. We premium fund the insurance. So that was a couple of grand last year, a couple of grand this year. We used the camper as a raffle for the Scrub Jam event activity. What do you call it? Function. So we actually determined that the camper was worth about $17,000 at the time of the Scrub Jam function. So we've recorded that as being sold for that amount, and therefore $17,000 worth of raffle expenses are recorded in the expenses. The raffle income is shown in the project income. I didn't actually dissect out how much we actually got, but I think Richard said we made about $4,000 or $5,000 on the raffle. And the motor vehicle expenses were down. That's because the year before, I think we rebuilt a motor on one of the utes. What else have we got in? Repairs and maintenance are down. They're $8,000 compared to $12,000 the year before. We paid about the same amount of subscriptions. We do have a few new expenses in this year. We're actually now paying superannuation expenses for Meg because she's an employee. We also have Meg's wages. We had to cover Meg for workers' comp, so that's included in there as well. Our volunteer costs are down, but that's because we had less volunteer activities. So our total expenses were $146,000. So we made a loss of about $7,000 for the year. But cash flow wise, we're actually up because of the grant income that we received. But from a financial statements point of view, we've made a small loss. But all in all, the year's been a very constructive year, as Richard said in his program, in his president's report. There's been some significant positive things that have happened over the last 12 months. From a balance sheet point of view, we've got the $10,000 as a debtor. Richard mentioned Voltra. They came in over the Christmas period. We gave them an invoice. So that was actually money owing to us, and it's showing in program income. And they paid on the 9th of January. So that was a good income stream. There's the bank accounts. We've got $7,000, $86,000, $75,000 and $700 in the bank. So we're looking financially viable. there was a prepayment on the insurance of $11,000. Liv's actually asked this at the directors' meeting. So the insurance for the year was $26,000 that was paid in about May. But that then means that covers a period from May through to May the following year. We're doing the figures as at December. So a portion of that had to be a prepayment. It was actually for the 2024 financial year. So that amount is $11,000. We've got a whole list of new assets that we purchased. And then we come down to the liabilities, which primarily consist of the premium funding that we pay for the insurance, which we have a little bit of interest on. We have $74,000 worth of grant money, which I just explained. So there's $74,000 worth of grant money we receive, which if we stopped trading as at the 31st of December, we would literally have to pay the $74,000 back to the government. That's why it's showing as a liability. All right, but we'll spend that, and we've probably spent a fair bit of that over the last 4 months. And then there's Susan's loan of $182,410, which has been sitting there for nearly 20 years. Actually, probably longer than 20 years. So that's the financial statements for the year. So all in all, it's been a very good year. I'd like to thank the directors for their assistance during this year. It was a little bit stressful because the bookkeeper changed towards the end of the year. So I had a few more questions and a few more complex questions that I normally would have. But there's also a set of financial statements for the company. So for those, I'm sure that most of you all know me. So there's Wild Mountains Limited as trustee for the Wild Mountains Trust. So we have to prepare 2 sets of financial statements. So they're there for the directors to sign, and they've approved them at the directors' meeting. So someone should probably move my treasurer's report, because technically I can't. If there's any questions, fire them away. So, premium funding? Yeah, basically it means rather than paying, so when the insurance came due, which was $26,000, rather than paying $26,000 up front, we agree to pay, basically a company agrees to lend us the $26,000 and we agree to pay them $28,000 to make monthly installments for the next 12 months. So premium fund is basically a form of finance to pay the insurance premium. We've only started doing that, I think, in the last 2 years. Prior to that, we used to pay it. But the trouble was, prior to that, so 3 years ago, the insurance was less than 10 grand. Last year it was 16, and this year it's 26. Actually, it might have been more than 16. It might have been 18 last year. So trying to pay that money up front versus paying $2,000 worth of insurance, worth of interest during the year to pay that off over basically on a month-by-month basis. That's effectively what premium funding is.
So, all right, well, I'm going to bring other total support people.
That's probably a good idea. The auditor's report should be moved by the treasurer. Yes.
Oh, no, John.
Thank you, Rick. I will hand over to Justin.
Thank you. Yeah, so as we do, the board as a group is standing down. This is the way we go. And they've all, as Richard said, offered to stand again for their existing positions. So if there are no objections, I'd like to move that the board be reinstated with our thanks, many thanks for past efforts and continuing to put yourselves forwards for another year of outstanding efforts. So if there are no objections, then I move that we put the board back in elected roles. Yes.
And may I just say that there have been no other nominations?
Yes, thank you. We have received no other nominations for the positions. There's no squabbling about who sits there. So yes, thank you, Richard. On that basis, if there's no objections, Can we put them back? Do we have show of hands?
No.
Well, thank you. Well, I got on the board and meeting back to our president.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for your continued trust and support. That concludes the formalities of the Wild Mountains annual general meeting. So I will close the annual general meeting at 1:12. Oh, sorry. Before I close the meeting, let's appoint. We need to appoint.
Unless you got somebody else, you can appoint somebody else. That's fine.
The list of nominations for. Sure. I'll move that we reappoint Gillo and Teese as our auditors for the 2024 financial year. And I have someone. Oh, look at that! It's unanimous. All right, thank you, Rick.
Do we stop recording this and
In just a second. I'll close the annual general meeting at 1:13 p.m. on the 21st of April 2024. Thank you.